Halo 2 is one of the best video games of all time, having a great story, gameplay that enhanced the series, and groundbreaking multiplayer that shook the entire video game industry. The game is truly special and personally my favorite mainline game in the series, and this is especially incredible considering how the game was actually made, and the huge amount of cut content ranging from cut levels, weapons, and entire enemies to even entire story arcs was considered. Bungie had always intended Halo 2 to be the final Halo, with no plans for sequels included, but as the development of the game progressed, a huge amount of compromises and changes had to be made to essentially get the game shipped out to the November 2004 release date. Bungie essentially had to assemble a cathedral out of a hurricane, which was essentially a quote taken from the developers themselves about the making and development of the game. So, in this video, in honor of Halo 2's 20th anniversary, yes, it has been 20 years, I want to cover a lot of aspects of Halo 2 in honor of the game. From the story of the heartbreaking development of the game, to the original narrative, to the E3 demo, to the huge, and I mean huge, catalog of cut content from the game at one point, and finally the I Love Bees campaign in this massive retrospective, which will obviously span a few videos as I can't chunk it all down to one massive video. So to start out, let's tell the story of the developers behind the game, Bungie, and the tale of their titanic struggle of development that they were essentially going through to get Halo 2 to release. So with that being said, let's grab our single-shot battle rifles, crunch some code, and get into the story of the development of Halo 2. The tale of our story starts after the release of Halo Combat Evolved in 2001. The game, as we all know, was a massive success for Microsoft, with essentially establishing the Xbox as a premier console in the gaming market, and also the title itself being a flagship title for the console. It set many sales records and overall was praised all around by the community, including myself as it's one of my favorite in the series. But as soon it became clear that a sequel to this massively popular game would be underway, and soon officially, Halo 2 was greenlit into development. Work on Combat Evolved by Bungie ended in October 2001, right before the official release in November, and the development for this game was actually pretty intense as well, with the last few months of the game being a frantic rush just to complete the game in time for its launch. This also involved tons of cut ideas, missions, alien factions, and so much more. In general, just enough content to fill its own video to be honest, but that's for another time. Early on in Halo 2's development, the idea for this sequel at Bungie became clear, as they wanted to essentially make a more bigger and kick-ass sequel, with also new fresh ideas, and also expand upon the cut ideas from the first game. As this was happening, after the crunch of Combat Evolved's development ended, many at the studio went separate ways, many going on lengthy vacations to recover from the lengthy development. Others at the studio were working on foreign versions of Halo Combat Evolved for the release, while also others at the studio were working on more original projects. This included Jason Jones, Bungie's co-founder, basically dedicating his time to an original project called Phoenix. And Bungie West, who worked on the last-minute edition of the multiplayer for Halo Combat Evolved, was working on an original project called Monster Hunter. Sadly though, this project did not get too far in development as it was cancelled when the team was integrated into working on Halo 2. Only 6 weeks after Halo 1 shipped, ideas for a sequel were already starting to be discussed. Bungie codenamed the project Prophets after the new aliens being introduced in this new sequel. Everyone had ideas for Halo 2, and there was certainly enough content to make up an entire game that was cut not alone from Combat Evolved, and Bungie wanted to incorporate a lot of these cut ideas from the first game and expand upon it in the sequel. Jason Jones, the project lead on Combat Evolved, had admitted in the past that he never really liked working on sequels, but he felt that he owed it to the team to essentially greenlit Halo 2, since he was the one that got the company to move to Seattle when Microsoft bought the company during the making of the first game. Jason Jones would not really be involved heavily in the early development of Halo 2, as he was mainly working on his original project, Phoenix. And without a central force to guide the production of Halo 2, many core teams of the company just started to work on their own ideas, independent from each other with little communication between them, which honestly would soon spell problems later on down the line. The engineering part of Halo 2's development was working on a new engine for the game, with the knowledge of the Xbox they had gained from the making of the first game, but this time around with an actually finished Xbox to work with. The engine that they were developing they would later dub as the Pistol engine by the developers at Bungie. Alongside a new engine, they also wanted to have the game to include more normal maps or levels, also known as bump maps. These type of levels and textures essentially are generated in the game to appear to have more depth and detail, but also taking up less polygons and memory, which is a pretty cool feature and a basic thing that is very common in games today. The programming side of the team was planning to include more stencil effects to the game, which basically would have given the game more elaborate lighting and shadows, way more than the first game. Many features of the stencil effects include deep shadows, more complex and intricate lighting, as many developers around this time wanted to include more complex shadows in their games. The most popular example of AAA games including this was Doom 3 that came out in 2005. The engineers working on these effects used a map from Halo 1 to basically showcase the new engine and all of the new stencil effects and shadows, as you can see here, which honestly look pretty impressive. The story side of the team wanted to massively expand the universe of Halo for their goal with Halo 2, essentially giving way more depth than ever before. Jason Jones collected his ideas for a sequel and gave it to the story team. This involved a huge sprawling narrative of Chief defending Earth against the Covenant, introducing a new race of aliens called the Prophets that were also an idea from the first game that was cut, and a radical new part of the narrative where for multiple missions you would play a character called the Dervish, which was essentially a warrior for the Covenant. The name actually comes from a title in the sect of Islam, which was essentially an early name used for the character that would eventually become the Arbiter, but was cut later on. This idea for this character and this whole part of the narrative actually originally came from Joseph Staten and his original idea for Halo 2, who was the head writer for the first game. He was fascinated by the story of the warrior who was in charge of safeguarding the first Halo, and essentially what would happen to him after he blew it, essentially. On the gameplay side of things, many designers wanted to add many cool new elements to the gameplay for Halo 2 and make it more enjoyable than the first game. Many developers toyed with many new ideas. Like how designer Jamie Greener essentially took the pistol from Halo 1, replaced it with a model of the assault rifle from the game, but still kept the features of the pistol. This eventually though led to the creation of Halo 2's battle rifle as we know today. Many cool features of the original gameplay were also changed quite a bit during the development of Halo 2. Like this time around, the Halo would feature mainly instead of the pistol, it would be mainly replaced by the battle rifle, and the classic assault rifle would essentially be replaced by the submachine guns. Bungie would also allow this time players to get their hands on the energy sword, which was a highly requested item from the last game. During the development of Halo 2, Bungie toyed with the idea of manually controlled detonation for their grenades, a concept that was similar to their scrapped satchel charge idea. Basically, the idea would be that you would hold down the trigger when you threw a grenade and would keep it from exploding, then when you let go of the trigger, it would explode, a manually controlled detonation of sorts. But this was cut later on in development. Other features of the game would also be thought of as more vehicles were also being designed for this game as well. A human-style ATV, which eventually would become the Mongoose, was originally supposed to appear. Also, flying crafts of well, like the Falcon, were also supposed to appear, but were cut. On the multiplayer side of things, the team actually wanted to make the multiplayer even better than before, and soon it was going to be massively improved. A factor in this improvement was when Microsoft released their online internet-based online system called Xbox Live, and they essentially wanted Halo 2 to be the flagship for this service. Even Microsoft originally wanted to release Halo 2 before the Xbox Live's launch in 2002, but they found that to be impossible, so it had to be delayed. The design this time around for the multiplayer of Halo 2, the team essentially wanted to make a big 32-player round-based game mode, but this was considered too challenging at the time with the hardware included, so a party-style game was put in place, which was the model for the multiplayer. The idea of this party-like system included ideas for networking, lobbies, and connecting to matches were also all in the works. Many of these features, as we know, are pretty common today, but at the time Bungie, Xbox Live, and Halo 2 were truly pioneering. For the art side of the development for Halo 2, believe it or not, the art team in Halo 2 was actually starting out with just one member on the team working, but soon this was quickly expanded, and the team was hard at work at developing early developments and concepts for the designs of the world, what the new factions would look like, or even what Earth in the Halo universe would even be. For the music side of things in the development, in the spring of 2002, the composer, Jesus himself, Marty O'Donnell, and his partner Michael Salvatore met with Microsoft to discuss releasing that amazing, heavily music from the first game officially. In the meeting for this was a man called Nile Rodgers, who was the founder of Something Else Music Works, which was primarily a company that distributed video game soundtracks in the industry. He actually discovered Halo with the band he was producing at the time, Maroon 5, who kept skipping out on recording sessions to play the game. Impressed with the game, he got in touch with Microsoft and his company basically distributed a soundtrack for the first game. After this, he then approached Marty O'Donnell and essentially said that he can get famous musicians on the next game's soundtrack, which soon brainstormed many ideas for the upcoming Halo 2 soundtrack. As the game's development progressed, for the release date of the game, Bungie was originally wanting the release of the game to be sometime in 2003. There was a lot of pressure from Microsoft as they wanted to release the game to help carry the console and their Xbox Live service to the new generation, the Xbox 360, which was originally in conceptual development. Also, they planned to have Halo 3 come out in 2005 alongside the release of that console. Alongside pressure from industry rivals and Microsoft, it kind of forced Bungie's hand, and eventually Bungie had to show something to the public for Halo 2 and generate hype. And this all led to the original XO2 New York event for Microsoft, Halo 2's trailer. In late June, Bungie decided to create an in-engine trailer for the game for Microsoft's American XO2 event that will be held in August to basically showcase the game and also generate more interest for the Xbox. Originally envisioned as a 30-second to minute trailer, it was soon decided they actually wanted to show a part of a cutscene from the game in the new engine that they were working on. This trailer would have a scene similar to the final game, but also in a lot of alternate in different ways, as it was originally an entrance to a level that was cut from the final game. The premise is Chief would leap out of the airlock on Cairo Station similar to the final game, but instead would board a Covenant ship after hearing many distress calls throughout the trailers from Marines and other personnel. Overall, I think that the XO2 trailer is pretty awesome, with many cool differences from the final game, like the lighting and shadows being a pretty huge difference compared to the game's final flat lighting. Also in general, just the sequence of events happens differently in this version of the trailer compared to the final game, as originally this was supposed to be an original opening to the level Covenant ship, which was cut in the original Halo 2, but it was eventually replaced, as we all know, by that badass bomb scene, so I guess it worked out in some ways. Other original ideas for the XO2 trailer for Halo 2 actually was an idea that Chief sometime during the trailer would smash his fist against a window and, according to developers, say something pretty pitty. Chief in the scene was allegedly, according to the developer's commentary, was going to be watching the Covenant attack Earth. He would then smash his fist against a window and say, "Only blood will pay for this." Kind of a cringy moment, to be honest, and kind of glad it got cut from the final trailer. The trailer also features some badass new original music from Marty O'Donnell, with a 32-piece orchestra and a 16-person choir involved in the making. Also, all of the graphics and models and how just clean everything looks with the dynamic lighting looks fantastic, and kind of shows a really cool early version of Halo 2. Overall, a pretty sick trailer. Now, the work for the trailer, like a lot of things, was worked on the last minute, as lines for the trailer were only recorded 3 weeks prior and the music was put in at the last minute, with the final rendering of the trailer coming in close as well. Eventually though, it was all worth it, as the trailer was a standout moment at the XO2 event, generating massive hype for Halo 2. The trailer never came out officially at the time online, but renders of the trailer did come out to many eager fans waiting for Halo 2. And Microsoft gave a holiday 2003 release window for the game, which at the time seemed impossible by many insiders who were working on the game. The trailer showcased many elements, like the sheer ambition and confidence from Bungie for the making of the game, and this was definitely shown publicly by Microsoft and Bungie alike. But eternally, the game's development was actually coming about very slowly than usual, with the game due in just over a year at the time, and Bungie not actually having much progress on the campaign or multiplayer actually completed. It really looked like at the time not much hope was for the 2003 release window. The truth of the matter was, not much was actually really built outside of the trailer. Only bits and pieces here and there were completed of the campaign and multiplayer. Some of the holdup in the development was due to the fact that there was a lack of leadership early on in development guiding the project. But another factor was actually the engineering team, which was still writing and coding the new engine, which put a pause on all the art and design teams from being able to see how their work looked like in the final game and implementing it and designing it. And as the development for the game slowly progressed, there was also some test environments and levels designed for various planned moments of the campaign as well by Bungie. One was kind of a low-gravity environment testing space environments. The second had Covenant patrolling dark areas, basically prototyping the planned stealth mode that was originally supposed to be in Halo 2. And the third was basically a mass of humans dropped by a ship transport, resulting in some kind of wave defense-like style. All these planned levels and test environments were called the Milestone 1 levels, as they indicated at the first milestone of completion in the Halo 2 development, and these were actually showcased behind doors to a select few in the E3 2003 demo. Further slower progress was made in the campaign and development for Halo 2, which included brutes, prophets, SMGs, and also finally a finished outline of the story was completed. And well, like I said, there was a lot of strides made in the development, but just over a year of development actually being completed, there wasn't really actually much strong progress made in terms of completing the game, which would soon spell disaster later on. Development of the game continued in 2003 with major changes on the horizon for the game's future. One of these factors was the co-founder of Bungie itself left during this time, and another one of these elements was Jason Jones' Phoenix project that he was working on. And while this project did have a lot of progress, including a playable build, it was ultimately cancelled as there was no clear direction for this project overall. After the project's collapse, instead of the resources for that project essentially being put into Halo 2, the team would actually work on another original project called Gypsum. But still, this did not fix the overall issues in the development and many of the fractured leadership issues ongoing with Halo 2. For this year's multiplayer side of things, many of the party game maps and modes were actually starting to move into pre-visualization, making significant progress in terms of the multiplayer. While on the campaign side of things, progress was much slower. As a result, Bungie announced that the game would actually come out in 2004 at some point instead of 2003. To ease all the negative press that came from the announcement, Bungie also would eventually announce they would make an appearance at E3 2003. This was a big deal at the time, as E3 was the primary event to showcase your game to investors and the general public to generate interest in your game. And there was a lot riding on E3 for Microsoft, who wanted Halo 2 to basically carry the Xbox Live and the original Xbox for the rest of its lifetime and continue to give people the incentive to buy the console into the holiday season until the eventual new console in 2005. With the development of the E3 demo, Bungie wanted to do something different from other E3 presentations. Usually at the time, most of these were usual pre-rendered trailers, but Bungie had something radical planned. They were actually planning a full-on demo, which sadly would truly live in smoke and mirrors and in infamy. Development on the demo began in February 2003, and a lot of work was done. The hope was that the demo would actually kick the development in the campaign and multiplayer into overdrive, as still at this point the development for Halo 2 was slow and not making much progress. The idea for the demo was that a part of the level, Earth City, which will later become Outskirts and Metropolis in the final game, would be in the demo. They wanted to, instead of having a pre-rendered trailer, would be have a fully playable demo to show to audiences, which at the time was still pretty radical, showcasing this new level in the demo and without cheating to show off their new engine and what the game could do. By April at the time, a playable version of the demo was made just in time for the editors from the Xbox magazine to stop by and take a look. For the demo, Bungie was also going to incorporate many of the new gameplay elements in Halo 2, including vehicle hijacking and dual wielding. The demo also show off the early in progress Pistol engine with all the cool stencil effects and dynamic lighting. There was also cheats included in the demo, as there were so many issues with getting it to run. One of these cheats included the fact that the player would be warped into animations without a button. This was all done to help to make the demo run. Even with all the new lighting effects and textures being reduced to the lowest levels of polygons and effects, the demo still performed poorly, with many poor frame rates and overall spelling huge issues for the demo and Halo 2. Luckily though, right before E3, the team was able to get it running smoothly at the last minute. In preparation for the E3 demo, Microsoft built a massive booth and presentation with a theater inside to basically showcase the demo and present Halo 2 to the world. This all went smoothly at first, except during the early rehearsal of the demo where files got corrupted due to madnix from a nearby audio system. Luckily though, there was a backup and the demo was able to be presented smoothly and showcased to audiences. Now, what did the demo for Halo 2 actually contain, and why is it so infamous? Well, the demo starts out with a brief introduction from Sergeant Johnson, basically saying that this demo is real gameplay and it isn't smoke and mirrors, which sadly, as we all know, it kinda was. After this, it shows an early cutscene with Chief landing down in the new Earth City level, then in a scripted manner showcasing all of the new effects and gameplay that the engine and the game itself could do. And overall, my personal thoughts on the demo is I do think it's really cool and overall way more advanced than the final game we got, showing more combat on Earth and also showing some alternate designs for characters and location, with really cool dynamic lighting, cool stencil shadows, and also in general just a more brighter and more polished looking game instead of the flat lighted game that we got in the final build. Also, environments are just more open and combat seems a little bit more ambitious, but still there are a lot of cool elements to this demo. Now for how the demo did back with the public in 2003, and let's just say it was a massive success and a huge standout moment of that year's E3, with many in the audience having audible reactions during the presentation, and many shocked people commenting on the demo after they saw it.
I mean, when I'm watching the demo and you climb up on the cruiser and kick the guy off, I lost it.
The popularity of the demo was huge. Even bootleg videos at the time of the demo blew up online and grew up massive hype for the game in 2003. Sadly though, as we all know, the demo was actually just smoke and mirrors after all, and actually would soon be the start of a massive struggle just to get Halo 2 to its release. To quote Joe stated in commenting later on the demo, "We came back from E3 with the demo. We did not come back from E3 with a playable part of a level. Bungie had hoped that the demo would be the kickstart to development of the game, and even even though it was a massive success and generated many widespread acclaim, massive problems soon started to form. For one, that the engine that they were using in the demo could not properly run the levels that the designers were creating for the game, even on the hardware that Bungie themselves was using, and especially not on the Xbox's hardware. It could barely run the demo at moments. It barely ran on development kits, and the team that were using it soon realized that all the years and the amount of work that was put into this Pistol engine just had to be scrapped. The engine could not be used during the development to run Halo 2, so at the time it was decided that the engine overall had to be scrapped and completely resized and redone to basically make it run on the Xbox hardware. Also, another huge problem was starting to appear to Bungie as soon as it was realized that a massive crunch was required to get the game done, as once again the only tight deadline that they had was the release for 2004, which at the time was an incredibly short period to develop a game. This realization was hard for everyone at Bungie to stomach, but luckily Halo 2 is a good example of when tight deadlines, an amazing group of creative talent, and a little bit of luck, it all could be done and done well. Jason Jones after E3 brought the team together and said that the campaign would have to be completely rethought out, but the entire levels have to be cut and alongside many other features had to be scrapped. Now, why the game had to come out in 2004 was simply because Microsoft didn't want the game to come out for their new console. They wanted this game to basically carry on Xbox Live and the original Xbox in the marketplace. So 2004 just had to be the time period to get the game done. The big planned 32-player mode was officially scrapped, and like mentioned, the engine had to be completely rewritten from the ground level to be less intensive and to be able to run on Xbox hardware. The gameplay designers who already weren't able to play the game and see what they were implementing and designing before due to the engines had to face completely new challenges as well, like how either dual wielding or melee combos could be in the Halo 2 game, but sadly not both. Ultimately though, the former won out. The other projects that Bungie was working on, like Gypsum, were scrapped officially, which at the time did make some progress as a third-person action game with a playable build and some music from Marty O'Donnell. Soon though, all hands on deck were needed for the race to save Halo 2, as the end of 2004 was once again the last chance for Bungie to release the game, as Microsoft had to have the game carry the original Xbox to the end of its life and get people to purchase it more in the holiday season, and cannot be used for their new console that they were developing. This left the team at Bungie after the E3 demo in 2003 with just a little over a year to fully develop the game and complete it, which is an insane timeline and crunch as games usually take years to be developed. But to have a game like Halo 2 to be made in just a year was truly insane and also incredible. It featured some of the worst crunch periods in the industry. Workers would be working 70-hour weeks, relationships would be destroyed due to the game's development, and work-life balances would basically be non-existent. But regardless though, the team at Bungie knew they can do it with the amazing talented staff that they had. If they could essentially pull off the self-imposed tight deadlines and pull through, in theory they could actually make the game on time, which once again just shows how amazing the team at Bungie was at the making of this game and all the struggles they had to endure. Throughout the summer of that year, Joe Staten and Jason Jones would work together on rewriting the story and cutting down anything at a moment's notice to get the game out. Like for example, an entire level called Forerunner Tank was cut from the game, as some of the geometry from the plane level will be used in the final game and repurposed. Many other levels, designs, and elements were also done in a similar fashion in the race and the pure insanity just to get the game out at the end of 2004. This was all going on at the time with the public not knowing anything about the horrendous development and the hype for the game only growing. In September of 2003, a short documentary was made showcasing some of the early development of the game in light of all the other issues going on right now in the present. Making the situation harder in October, the Microsoft CEO even claimed that Halo 3 was already in development, despite the fact that getting Halo 2 was already a huge challenge already. While at this time the soundtrack for the game was coming together, with Marty O'Donnell working with Niles to get rock stars on the official soundtrack. As a result, many bands offered their services, including Incubus, guitarist Steve Vai, and Breaking Benjamin, who even offered their services for free just because they loved the game that much, which is just an awesome fact to know. Even in the development of the game's soundtrack, Adam Levine, the lead singer of Maroon 5, actually sent Bungie a clip of himself singing the Halo theme, and sadly though this never got used, probably for the better. And soon songs were created, with the original music created by Marty O'Donnell also incorporated, with the soundtrack for the game slowly coming together. On the multiplayer side of things, it was progressing as well, as Bungie wanted to essentially incorporate a virtual couch in the design of the multiplayer. Essentially, the idea that you can actually join into a party with your friends and play different multiplayer playlists. Once again, a very common feature in many online games today, but at the time was brand new and groundbreaking. Bungie was in general just so good at the online aspect of gaming that they even worked with the Xbox Live team on updates for their service service. This whole process though wasn't without challenges, as the Xbox Live team initially did not understand the concept of parties, and Bungie essentially had to create a prototype for the Halo 2 multiplayer just to show them, as seen in this little demo right here. Eventually though, the prototype worked, and the parties and other common online features were put into the multiplayer and Xbox Live. Xbox did have some worries further down, but once again, Bungie pressed forward with their ideas, despite some issues with the servers initially. Moving on to 2004, in January 2004, Frank O'Connor, yes, that one, joined Bungie and actually provided weekly updates on development for the game, including screenshots, which back in 2004 were actually a really hard thing to get and could crash the game for developers who were working on it. Overall, just kind of a cool and interesting feature that many games in the future would eventually do, but it was cool that Bungie was even doing it back then. Eventually, so much progress was actually made on the multiplayer, unlike the campaign, that an actual alpha test was actually made for the multiplayer and was sent out for a lucky 1,000 Microsoft employees, usually through a disc in the mail. This alpha build was a huge hit at the company and showcased the huge potential of Halo 2's multiplayer, even though many things about the alpha build were still missing, like many vehicles, a HUD from Halo Combat Evolved was still there, and there was also no deal building. Also, a kind of cool side fact here is that both of the private multiplayer alpha and private multiplayer beta builds have been leaked and are playable on modded Xboxes and online, so which is kind of cool. By February, voice acting had actually started for the game and was completed by mid-March, with many high-profile actors joining the cast this time around, thanks mainly to the success of the first game. Actors like Ron Perlman was also included in this cast, just to showcase how many high-profile names were included this time around. He would eventually go on to voice Admiral Hood in the final game, having some great quotes. Another problem that was looming on the horizon was E3 2004, as it was quickly approaching. At this time, the campaign was in no shape to be shown at E3, but Bungie still wanted to show something, so the decision was made that the multiplayer would actually be the presentation this time around for this side. Like before, it was an 8-minute demo, showcasing a map this time around called Zanzibar, and overall, the presentation at E3 2004 went very well. It showcased many core elements of the game, like dual wielding, physics for vehicles, and other elements in the game with some of that classic Bungie banter that we're always so used to.
But be careful. If you let an enemy get too close... Oh, take it!
Other major news also came alongside E3, as it was finally announced that November 9th, 2004 was the official release date of the game, which meant by October, this was the absolute last chance for Bungie to turn in the game and get it finished. Other weird things that kind of happened at the demo I wanted to mention included this weird, legit fact. The Microsoft CEO, who at the time was on stage at E3 2004 with the presentation of the game, announcing the release date for the game, showcased the date tattooed on his arm, just to showcase how extreme and certain he was of the release date. Now, whether or not this tattoo was actually real is still up to debate. Still though, this is just an insane, weird fact about the hype for Halo 2.
You are a sad, strange little man.
After E3 2004, the team did not catch a break, as development for the game did not slow down. Ideas were put on a timeline on a whiteboard, as seen as this behind-the-scenes footage for the behind-the-scenes doc for Halo 2. Deadlines and ideas were constantly changed, which makes sense as why they were on a whiteboard, just to show how frantic and ever-changing the development was for Halo 2. A major example of this was one of the major milestones in the timeline. This included getting the game code complete by June. After this, then it would have to be geometry for the game would have to be done the very next week. And then after that, a rating for the game, which was M at the time, would also have to be done as well, just to show how tight the deadline was for Halo 2 and the development for the game at Bungie. Soon, the marketing campaign for the game started out, with soon small print ads for the game starting to appear around June, and the marketing campaign really kicking off in August, with slogans at the marketing hinting at a battle between humans and the Covenant on Earth being a major focal point of the marketing. That month, developers were finishing in-game animations and moving on to cinematics, all of it racing towards that tight deadline that Bungie had already established. Bungie later on would run another company multiplayer beta with even more employees involved this time around at Microsoft. This time around, the beta build showed off to Microsoft employees was also much more closer to the final game, even though weirdly some elements that were in the insane crunch did not make it to the final build, weirdly. Other quick changes occurred in development, like how the battle rifle was quickly changed from being a one-shot into a 3-shot burst weapon in the final build. Also, the mongoose was just cut as well. The crunch for the game continued on to July, with the dialogue going into localization. Hands-on testing with outside players was already done, and the feedback was collected in terms of development. This little bit of user testing I thought was pretty cool, as it really shows Bungie, despite having the insane timeline to get the game out, still wanted to release a product that was, well, without bugs and still played well, which is an awesome fact to know. By the end of July decided the game needed to hit content complete, with all levels, assets needed to be in the final game so that the game could get rated, and so that the press can also get their hands on the multiplayer for articles to be made in September. All this really shows how tight, hard, and insane the deadlines were for the game in terms of getting the game out at the end of 2004. By the July-August time period, the marketing for the game really started, with Bungie and Microsoft having a lot of unique ideas they wanted to do for the marketing campaign. During this month, finally a trailer for the game got released using high renders from the E3 demo, and it was actually sent out to movie theaters. This is so how huge and confident they were in Halo 2, and just also in general how the video game industry was starting to become a major player in the economy. Another part of the marketing that was added was this concept of an ARG, alternate reality game. The concept of this ARG is where real life people would interact and problem solve on multiple either online or in real life to solve a mystery surrounding a B-site and AI, all connecting to events that lead up to Halo 2. All these events will collectively be known as the I Love Bees campaign, and it would actually briefly appear as a URL in the first trailer for Halo 2 to help spread awareness. Overall, it was a pretty cool ARG and definitely helped spread awareness for the type of marketing in future releases, and overall generated huge amounts of hype for Halo 2. More on this on a future video. Further changes in the hectic development of the game were made. As mentioned before, the Darvish was the original character of the Covenant Warrior in the game. This was actually pretty hidden in the marketing, but Microsoft came at Bungie at the last minute to basically change the character's name. They did this because they were nervous about having a character with an Islamic name during the War on Terror at the time, so the name The Arbiter was chosen, which overall in my opinion was a better choice. Late in August, the marketing still continued. Bungie began taking the E3 build around to market the game, while the crunch intensified to a staggering 100-hour work weeks, which were very common in the office, with even many sleeping at the office in the intense race just to complete the game. By this point, the game was in a complete enough state that Marty O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore was finally able to write music for it, with the soundtrack finally being able to be incorporated into the final game. Bungie also experimented with making the campaign playable online with friends in the sort of co-op mode like we see in Halo 3, but at the time it was cut since they didn't have the resources to make it in time. Around this time, Frank O'Connor hosted the first ever Halo 2 tournament with early builds of the multiplayer to market it and for players to play in, and later on it would obviously start the longer trend of Halo and tournaments. At one hilarious point during development, Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer visited the studio, and engineer Charlie Goat took the opportunity to moon him while someone was taking a picture of the CEO. That picture was actually used as sort of a placeholder in the game's files for a missing .ass file, a sort of 3D file format system that Bungie was using to make Halo 2. And hilariously enough, the picture actually ended up making to the final game, though not in really any form that any normal player could find. You really just would have to dig into the files to find it. Nonetheless though, the ESRB, still dealing with the aftermath of the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas Hoff coffee scandal, which is a whole nother matter entirely, required that the rating of the game to accurately reflect the nudity that was technically in the game. So Microsoft and Bungie ended up delaying the game slightly for its release so they can actually recall it to apply the new M-rated sticker on it that listed nudity. This whole ordeal cost the company at least $500,000, and it's just kind of a crazy scenario. By September, this was the absolute last month that Bungie had to work on the game, as in October they would have to send off the game to production to have discs manufactured for the November release. And like the previous game, the team at Bungie was on an insane grind to get the game finished, even in that last month. In the first week of September, the manual, yes, the video game manual, was officially done, and the score itself was mostly completed, but still parts of it needed to be worked and added to the game. Editing on the behind-the-scenes doc that was covering the game was done, and in the middle of the month, the game was finally coming together, with it, according to Bungie, finally being fun. With by the end of the month, many at the studio finally finishing their work on the video game. Work continued on the game even in the final hours before they had to ship the game for certification and production. Skulls were apparently put in at the last minute according to Jason Jones, with even Joe Staten apparently adding some last minute facial animation in the last 24 hours they had to work on the game. Even some flood spores in the tank at the beginning of the level Oracle, some developers were spending the last hours tweaking their animations. And finally, it was all done. Whether it was done, complete or not, the game was shipped off for certification and manufacturing. Bungie had indeed finally finished the fight in the development of Halo 2. After the game was sent off, the team at Bungie decided to take many deserved breaks. The development for Halo 2 was truly insane, tight, and really just on another level compared to Halo Combat Evolved's development. Many on the team had to give up so many things and sacrifice so much, and that is really truly heartbreaking. For example, the tools programmer for the game, Matt Noguchi, had spent the last 3 months working 14 to 60 hour days, 7 days a week on the game, while designer Paul Petro had not even slept in his own bed for a month because he was so intense on working on the game. So much was given up, but at the end of the day, the team of Bungie truly did the impossible and made a game that really stands the test of times. It shows that sometimes you have the right talent, a push, and maybe some insane hours and luck. Anything is possible. Now to cover the actual release of the game. Microsoft wanted it to be essentially the video game event of the year, and honestly it really lived up to that title. The I Love Bees campaign ended and a contest for 50 people was done to have people fly into Microsoft's headquarters to play the game early to help market it. And when the release date of November 9, 2004 came around, the official US launch party was actually in Times Square for the game, with even a countdown for the launch. Man, really cool times. With even reportedly 6,500 stores staying open till midnight for the launch as well. And well, how did the game do after it launched? Well, we all really know the answer to that. It of course did amazing. It sold 2.4 million copies in the first 24 hours alone, and the game, as we all know, was a huge critical success as well. And even decades later, the game still holds up with amazing storytelling, fun gameplay, and groundbreaking features it introduced that are very common today. Now, for after the release of the game, content and support for it still continued, as Bungie would release 5 more maps of the multiplayer and a DLC map pack that apparently the development of went more smoothly than the full game's development. After this, Bungie would vow not again to go through the hell that they went with Halo 2, and eventually with Halo 3, the development of the game, while it was not perfect and had its own crunch, was not as notorious as Halo 2 was. And, well, overall, that was the insane story of Halo 2 and its development. All the insane struggle it took to get the game to its release date, and all the insane moments and disasters that came alongside it. And while a lot of it is heartbreaking, I do have to give so much thanks and appreciation to the team at Bungie who developed Halo 2, who really went above and beyond during the making of the game, to really give us a game that's so special and holds up to this day. Overall, thank you. So that was the story of Halo 2's development. If you liked the video, please comment and subscribe, and well, have a nice day. Peace.